Hello, welcome friends. Today we're going to discuss theories of state, especially Marxist theory of state. So, what is state? So, let us introduce what is state. The state is central to our understanding of modern societies and politics. It is a truism and mention that state plays a crucial role in the functioning of modern society. What then is the state? This appears to be simple questions, but when we attempt to answer this, we found the answer is elusive. In the course of answering these questions, we would realize that our understanding of politics itself is so great extent linked with the understanding of state. Today, it is impossible to think of life without framework of the state. The state has come to be equated with the civility and identity, although there are enough skeptics and the critics who decry the institutions and the practices of the state. It has become an integral part of the everyday life. It would not be an exaggeration to say that we start and end our lives within its confines, and the recognition of the state in both matters in rather crucial. This should illustrate the significance of the concept of and our need to study it, besides the most of the fundamental concepts and the debates surrounding it. For instance, around the concept of rights, applications, and law acquire meaning only in the context of the state. Our attitude to the state is to be great extent determined by our conceptualization of it. From the point of view of an active citizenship, it is important to include a critical and insightful understanding of the state as part of any meaningful political education. All this makes the study of the state significant. Having highlighted the importance of studying the concept of the state, it needs to be mentioned that it is one of the most problematic and the ambiguity concepts of the politics. The ambivalence of being a consequence of its certain yet elusive character. So overall, it is an importance. It is the importance of the state of the contemporary societies, and the politics is itself conflicted with the state. The appropriateness of this conflation is the subject of the rather lively debate in the political theory. Different historical experiences have led to differing the perceptions and the practices of the state. Yet all states do have a territory, legal system, and judiciary, and monopoly of force, and so on. The idea of an impersonal and a sovereign political order is an intrinsically modern idea that, and by extension, also the idea of citizenship, the gradual erosion of the feudal ties and the controls mean of the redefinition of political authority and the structures as well. The idea of modern state, which we all examine in this unit, emerges around this time. In fact, it was only towards the end of the 16th century, and the concept of the state becomes central to the European and political thought. Now we're going to discuss what is state actually. What is the definitions? What are the definitions, and what are the characteristics of state? Now, understanding the state. It was around the time of the Enlightenment that major inquiries into the basic nature and the structure of the state began to made and a symmetric nature. The new concerns focused on the distinctions between the new modern state that had come into the being and the traditional state system. The new concerns also focused on the relationship between state and society. The Enlightenment thinkers were particularly concerned with the questions of where the state ended and the society began. It was a result of the intellectual efforts of the Enlightenment thinkers that we are today in a position to address some key questions regarding to the nature of the state. Some of these questions are: what is state? How long has it been the state? Some of the questions are what are the main features of the state? These are all important questions that need to be answered before we proceed to the inquiry theories of state. Now, state can be defined as centralized lawmaking, law enforcing, politically sovereign institution of the society. In other words, it is useful to understand and define the state in terms of the functions it performs. Put briefly and simply, the state. First one is comprises the state of institutions which ultimately control over the means of the violence of the concerns, the coercion within a given territory. It monopolizes the rule making within the territory, develops the structures for the implementation of the rules, and regulates the market activity within the territory, and insists on the regulations of the distribution of the essential material goods and services. However, in the modern times, that is to say that during the last 300 years ago and so, a whole new state of the functions have been added to this, and it has been argued that a major task of the modern state system in Europe was to be enable the development of industrialism. It was also under the industrialism that the modern society, the modern state, came to enjoy the tremendous powers, which also become so omnipotent that it became virtually impossible to think of human life outside the framework of the state. The state is also the perceived pervasive today, but it was also like this. It always like this. Was there a time when the people could live without a state? This leads us to the second question: how old is state? Living in the modern times, we need to take that the state granted as if it is has always been a part of human society. Moreover, we also tend to make some of the features of the modern state, like national, representative, centralized, in interventions, and of granted. And we need to recognize that not only whether these features are not always a part of the state, that the state itself was not always there. Therefore, the questions on the life of the state and the state of itself was not always there. It was not always there. And therefore, the questions of the life state can be answered by suggesting that although there is nothing exclusively modern about the state, nonetheless does not have been a very long life in the human history. It is therefore best to look upon the state as a contingency and not a perennial feature of human life. If we were to divide the entire human history into three phases: pre-agrarian, agrarian, and industrial, then the state certainly did not exist in the pre-agrarian phase of human life. In the elementary situation of the hunters and the gatherers, there were no surplus and no division of labor. As a result, there was no need for any political centralization. However, once humans took to agriculture and consequently to a more settled life, division of labor and more complex form of human organization began to emerge. It was then gradually a state came into the being and extract surplus and regulate the division of the labor and maintaining exchange of the mechanism and settle disputes of what required. However, not all the agrarian societies had a state. Only the large and more complex ones did. Simple and elementary agrarian societies could still manage their affairs without a state. Although the state had arrived in a human world at this stage, it was still an option and not the inevitability. Some agrarian societies had a state and some did not. It was, however, in the third phase of human society, that is under the industrialism, that the state ceased to be an option and become an integral and necessary part of human society, with a limitless increase in the division of the labor and increasing complexity in the human life. People have found it impossible to manage without a state. So it would be fair to say that in the beginning, in the pre-agrarian stage of the human life, there was no state. Then the under agrarian conditions and human societies had a state and some did not, and we can say that even some needed a state and some did not. But under the industrial condition, there is no choice but we have a state. State under modern conditions are no longer option but a necessity. The range of nature and the state system in the human history is varied and great deal. There were small kingdoms, city-states, as well as large empires. However, under modern conditions, a new type of states like nation-state has emerged and pivoted the modern world. And we can say that the history of the state and in modern times, the history of the nation-states and in these nation-states centralized, intermittent and representative, and that has been the object of theorizing these various scholars. Now, we are going to discuss the Marxist theory of state, but before going into that, we previously now have to discuss what are the kind of the states, what are the so many features of the state, and what are the theories of state. So there are too many theories of state, like liberal conception of the state, Rousseau's conception of state, the Marxist perspective, the welfare state, the liberal egalitarian state, libertarian and minimal state, Gandhian perspective of the state, feminist theory and the state. Those are the kind of the states, but today we are going to study the Marxist perspective of the state. The take-off point of Karl Marx, 1818 to 1883, and Engels, 1820 to 1905, in the analysis of the state is unlike the preceding accounts, not of the individual and or his or her relation to the state. As Marx put it very eloquently, man is not an abstract being squatting outside the world. Marx argued that individuals by themselves do not tell us much. It is the interaction between the individuals and institutions and the society that makes the account worthwhile. He contains that the state has to be seen in a dynamic institution and comes by social forces are always changing. Thus, the key to understanding the relations between the people is the classic nature. Classes that argue that it created at a specific conjuncture in history. The implications is that historically there was a period characterized by the absence of the classes, and the future could be hold the classes of society, classless society. With the creation of the surplus procedure of the class of non-producers that can live off the productive activity of others emerges, that is the foundation of classless society in the society. There was who succeeded in the gaining control over the means of the production from the ruling class of both economically and politically. This led us to the intense, perpetual and irrecoverable conflicts in society. Such struggles that while becoming the motor force of our historical development also become the basis of the emergence of the state. Marx and Engels challenge the idea of the state can be neutral and represent the community of the public interest, though the classes did not exist. When the liberals claim that the state acts neutrally, is according to the Marx protecting a system of individual rights and defending the regime of the private property. Thus, its actions produce the results that are neutral. Marx is the is of the opinion that is a dichotomy between the private and the public, which characterizes the modern state. It's divised, and for it depolitizes the most important source of the power of the modern society, that is the private property. That which creates the fundamental and the crucial divide in the society presented as the outcome of the private contracts and not a manner of the state. However, he argues all the institutions and the structures of the state defend the interests of private property, and thus claims the neutrality that state makes untenable. Marxist politics would therefore require an action to plan to overthrow the state and the implications of the classes that hold the state. Marx characterizes the history of state broadly as having a state of the slave state to feudal state and there to a modern state, which capitalism as a basis. The last mentioned carries within its consequence of the highlighted class struggle, possibility of a revolutionary transformation of the consequences of and the creation of the socialist state. This would be the first time the history of the state and represented majority to be controlled by the proletariat, and unlike the earlier dictatorships controlled by the property of owning classes, this state would be the dictatorship of the proletariat and the ruling classes. Eventually, Marx argues that the logic of the historical development would lead us to the state to a communist stage. Material abundance and prosperity would distinguish the state from the earlier stage of statelessness, described as a primitive communism by Marx. In the communist state of society's evolution, due to the absence of classes and the class struggle, the state would become the redundant and with a way. The state, according to the Marx, exists to defend the interests of the ruling classes and deeply embedded in the socio-economic relations linked to the particular the class interest. We can discern at least two distinct states of Marx explaining the nature of the relationship between the classes and the state. Of the two more subtle position of the one of the, we'll examine the first. The position of the whole is that the state is a bureaucratic institution may take a variety of forms and constitute the source of a power which need to not be directly linked to the interest or to be the undergone and the unambiguous and control of the dominant class part of the short term. Thus, according to the view, the state appears to have a certain degree of power independent of the class forces, and thus it is described by being more relatively autonomous, and the other view we find often representative, and Marx writings in the states of role is in coordinate to divide the society in the interests of the ruling classes. That is, it sees that the state is merely a superstructure serving at the interests of the dominant class. Later Marxists have differed considerably which other interpretations of Marxist concept of the state. One of the most celebrated such as differences in the now famous the Miliband and the Poisson's debate. Ralph Miliband begins with stating the need to separate the governing classes from the ruling classes. The latter exercises the ultimate control, whereas the former makes day-to-day decisions. Miliband is suggesting that the ruling class does not get embroiled in the everyday business of the governance, and for the state is an instrument and that is for the domination of the society on behalf of every classes. And his contention is that in order the politically effective that the state is to separate from itself and ruling classes, and in doing this it might even have to take actions that might not be under the interests of the dominant ruling classes, of course, in the long run. For pollutions and of the classes of the affirmations of those the state positions of the officers is not to be of any significance. He draws the attention of the structural components of the capitalist state, which able to protect the long term framework of the capitalist production, and even if it's in the severe conflict of the segments of the capitalist class. In fundamental point of the pollutions, the argument is that the state is who holds to be the capitalism and ensuring the political organization is the dominant classes that are constantly engaged in the conflict due to the competitive pressures and the short term preferences. Further, the state ensures the political disorganization and of the working class, which because of many reasons that can threaten the hegemony of the dominant classes, and the state also undertakes the task of the political regrouping of complex ideological processes of classes and the non-dominant modes of the production who could act against the state. Thus, in the perspective of the centralized modern state, is both are necessary result to be the anarchic competition of the civil society and forcing the reproduction of the such competition and the device, and the state does not simply record the socio-economic reality in interest into the is very construction of the reinforcing the staff form and the codifying its elements. So this is Marxist theory of state. If you want a lecture in Bengali, comment below. That's for today. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. Bye bye.